We appreciate your patience. We were in executive session for reason number 3. We are back into open session, and I will go out of order a little bit. We have guests tonight, et cetera, et cetera. So, assessors, please introduce yourself.
Diane Peterson. I'm the assessor, and I'm here on behalf of a solar agreement that needs an amendment. I believe Laura put copies in your packets.
Do you have a number, Laura?
048.
Thank you.
So this is the, just generally what happens. The pilots that are signed by the community is a document that's negotiated while the project's still in its preliminary stage. And what happens under the terms of the agreement is once they're generating power, they get the certified generating certificate, and then they're required to send it to the town. And with the as-built plan, because what we have in the contract again is the preliminary site plan that they go to the planning board with. So we have all the actual documents in the amended agreement. So Pleasantdale Road, this is the smaller project, Treasure Valley 2 project that Nexium built. The certificate was, the generation is slightly smaller than they had originally signed up for. It was 1.32 megawatts. They're actually generating 1.268 megawatts, which is a $957 a year adjustment down for the town. Over the 20 years, you'll get $16,262.88 less. But it is what it is, and some of them come in and they're a little higher, so we'll wait and see. But that's all it is. I just need signatures from the board, unless there's any other questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Diane?
Well, this is obviously your recommendation.
Yes.
Go with this.
I do all the reconciliation for Central and Western Mass.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I get a motion to sign the amendment to the agreement for payment in lieu of taxes with Nexium?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
And that's document as presented. Are there any more questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Unanimous?
Sign that.
You have an
You
original.
gotta sign it.
Well, oh, I'm sorry. You have a Nexium signed one?
No,
No,
not yet.
okay.
You have to sign it first before they do.
Thank you very much. All right. While signatures are going on, I will give our guests a little bit of option here. The next thing up is public comment. However, I can move public comment to later in the evening if there are people who wish to comment on things that are coming up later in the agenda, if that makes sense. Or we can do two. So, is anyone here for general public comment that would like to speak now? No? All right, we're moving on then. Phase 2 managed growth study. We're on to number 7. Ron Barron, I saw you in the corner. Hi, Ron.
Hi, Ron. Hi, how is everybody?
Good,
Thank you
how are
very
you?
much for having me here today. I'm not going to try to take up too much time. For those of you guys who don't know me, my name's Ron Barron. I'm with the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. CMRPC is the association that provides technical planning assistance to 40 communities in southern central Massachusetts, one of which is Rutland. I've been working with the town for quite a while now to complete this second phase of a growth management study. We've gone over this multiple times in different events, so I don't want to bore too many people with the details on it. But just for the quick background, this came out of a conversation originally with the former town administrator, who was concerned about certain numbers of subdivisions that had been approved but hadn't been built yet, and we looked at that. And then out of that conversation, we were asked to take a look at the overall growth potential for the town, and that's what this phase 2 piece is. As of right now, we've completed that study. That has been, a draft has been submitted to the Growth Management Steering Committee for comment. I don't know how widely circulated this has been, but it's been sent out, so I'm trying to get comment on that so we can close that piece out now. We had several recommendations that came out of that, and I believe that the goals and recommendation piece may have been circulated to a wider audience than maybe the draft had been. One of the things that we wanted to discuss is I wanted to discuss very quickly is what we are recommending that the town pursue at this point. Obviously, one of the recommendations that came out of it was the development rate limitation bylaw, which was included as a recommendation because it was felt that given the need for further planning that we saw from the rate of development that was going on in town and the historical rate of development, that it could be a prudent option, and the town voted to pursue that. But we also suggested additional planning, and I know that a recommendation for a plan being further planning is not a terribly satisfying answer, but one of the reasons that we recommended that is because one of the things that we saw was there's a great discrepancy in the way longtime residents seem to view the town of Rutland versus how newer residents seem to think of the town of Rutland. And we think one of the things that has to be taken into consideration is that a broad-based community conversation needs to occur before the town takes any other action to decide the way they should manage growth going forward. If you try to mitigate any of the impacts, they're going to have ancillary effects. If you try to widen roads, it's going to make it easier for people to drive in. If you try to increase sewer capacity, it'll make it easier to develop. And those aren't necessarily bad things, but we feel that a conversation should occur at the local level, and that's why we're recommending doing further planning processes. Among the types of things we're recommending is housing production plans, updating the master plan, open space planning, whatever the town decides is the most effective use of their time going forward. We also had several other recommendations about talking about tax diversification, looking at increasing the opportunities for commercial development in the town center through zoning and regulatory reforms, and also other types of value capture strategies such as district improvement financing and things that would allow the town to further develop commercial activity in the town that help take some of the burden off of the tax-paying residents. I would like to just give the opportunity for any questions anyone might have at this point. If there's anything specific you would like me to give you an update on, as far as closing out this particular phase of the project, as soon as we get the comments from the steering committee and anyone who wants to weigh in on it, we're going to be submitting it to the state to close out the grant, and we will be available to assist you in anything else that you would need going forward.
Through the chair, can I ask that you elaborate on the comparison group, what towns were included for Rutland's comparison group for the basis of the study?
So for the phase 1 study, we used a comparison group that was based on a group that we had internally called the Rural 11, which was a group of communities from Rutland West.
What communities specifically?
I don't actually have the list in front of me, but it included the Brookfields and New Braintree and a lot of smaller farming communities that were in there. The reason we did that for the phase 1 study was because two reasons. Number one, we had already done a prior study on that, so we had a data set that we were able to update off that. But the other reason that we did it was because there was concern from the planning board and from the town administrator at the time that the town character of Rutland was changing. It had an identity as a rural community for a very long time, and that over the last 2 decades that has shifted from a rural community to a suburban community, and that set was selected because we thought it was illustrative of how much it had changed in that direction. For the phase 2 study, we used a different data set comparison group. We used the communities that are in the Wachusett School District and a couple of surrounding communities. And again, the reason for that was because even though the town of Holden is not necessarily population-wise comparable to the town of Rutland, it is a market that has a huge impact on the market of the town of Rutland. So I know there had been some discussion about, at certain points, about why we didn't use towns like Douglas that have comparable populations. And part of the reason why is because the market in Douglas is very, very different than the market in Rutland.
But the market in East Brookfield is very different than the market in Rutland. I mean, is it best practice to ignore demographic and area median income and all sorts of statistics just for the rural nature of those 11 communities? It just seems like the first comparison group was wildly inappropriate to use when you compare with what's going on in the town of Rutland. I mean, I don't think anybody would agree that West Brookfield and Ware have the same socioeconomic demographic information or comparable stats that Rutland would have.
Well, that's true, and that wasn't chosen because they have the same demographic information or median income or any of that
So
stuff.
the choice was made based on the fact that you already had the data set from a prior study
Mhm.
and because of a conversation with the town admin
Yes.
instead of best practice.
We were looking for a data set that would reflect a trend in the change of the nature of the community from a rural community to a more suburban community.
So West Brookfield's becoming more suburban.
No, West Brookfield is not becoming more suburban. Rutland is becoming more suburban. And that was why we selected that, because when we had those towns that were part of that Rural 11 study, Rutland was included because it was considered more of a farming community than a bedroom community. So we were looking at that because we could do a time series that showed how much that had changed from the prior study to this study, and that was the purpose of doing that. It was an internal discussion. We did it because we felt that it would be illustrative of that change, not necessarily of where all towns with your current demographics are going. But we weren't trying to do anything predictive with that particular set. We were trying to do something that showed how the town had changed in that particular way, and that's why we used that data set.
So to Mitch's line of questioning, and I think it gets back to what you were talking about, comments, I think you're waiting for official comments from the Managed Growth Committee. Is that what I
Correct,
just heard you
yes.
say?
Mhm.
If we would like, the board can also issue a set of comments. They could be individual comments.
Yeah, no,
And
I'd rather ask them here when they're here.
Oh, no, I know. You can continue to
Right.
ask questions, but just to take this to the next level relative to what he was just saying, it's probably an appropriate document to get commentary from a majority of the boards.
Yeah, bring it forward,
commissions. So,
Good steer.
Laura, is the board amenable to asking planning, Concom, FinCom, CIPC?
Agriculture, maybe? I don't know.
I mean, we can really reach out to any of them. Ask if they have any comments. If anybody here tonight, we all have hard copies as well as online copies. We can make sure that this gets onto our website in PDF format, so somebody could take one of these.
And if I may, to the question of whether or not it's a best practice, it is absolutely a best practice to try to use data sets that are going to illustrate the point you're trying to make.
So wait, are you trying to get to a point, or are you trying to
There is-
uncover the truth in the data? I guess, see, that's when you're trying to manipulate the data to make a point, that's not a best practice.
That's not data manipulation, though. I would argue that is, you're looking for a story within the data. There isn't a inherent truth in the data. You need to take the data, you need to compare it to things that are relevant to try to test the point you're trying to make. Data is useless unless you have a question you're trying to answer, and the question we were trying to answer is, has Rutland changed from a rural community to a non-rural community? And that was why we used the data set that we did.
So if the comparison group that you originally used to make that point, if you didn't discover the point you were trying to make in that data set, would you have used a different data set?
Well, there's no value in trying to look at data, find a point, and pull it out of the data. You have to start with a question and then use the data to answer the question. If you don't have a question, then data is just useless.
I understand, I'm a little
Is it
confused.
Is it fair to say that, as far as we can tell, the data set used in the first one, right, phase
Mhm.
1, was used because it more appropriately reflected Rutland as it once was? It gets back to kind of how he
But
started,
We
which
base
is
policy on that.
No, I'm just-
We're not
I-
interested in what Rutland once was, we're
I'm just-
interested in what it is now.
agreed. So the data set showed how Rutland changed versus the other communities where it had been one of them. It was more closely aligned maybe to West Brookfield 25 years ago than it ever would be today. Now, to Mitch's point, is there a way, we just finished, here we are, here you are with phase 2. Is there a way to get a data set with the cohort communities, like a You brought up Douglas, Mitch brought up Douglas, there's probably a few
I didn't
others.
bring up Douglas.
Ron brought up Douglas. If
Ron
you have
brought up
another to bring up,
It's been brought up by people in the past.
yeah.
Well, I think
Well,
that,
so for
to
the
get-
phase 2 study, I should just clarify that for the phase 2 study, we don't use the rural 11 data set because that wasn't the point we were trying to make. What we were trying to make in the phase 2 study was that we were looking to see what the growth rate could be, what the growth potential could be, and then look at the market factors to see how Rutland has compared in its growth rate to the communities that are actually affecting its market share. So we looked at Holden, we looked at Paxton, we looked at some of the other communities that are surrounding it, and the communities that are in the school district.
Princeton, Boylston, West Boylston.
Yes, thank you.
right.
don't
I
have
just
the list in
remember,
front
you know,
of me.
my point in, you know, part of what Sheila said is true in the sense of addressing my point, but the other part is, you know, when we have a presentation and we have a town meeting and there's a chart that compares permits being pulled in Rutland with permits being pulled in the comp communities, and the comp communities are wildly different in terms of demographics, housing, infrastructure, socioeconomics, median area income. That's not a true reflective graph, right? And then you have these other charts, like persons per household. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that isn't based off census data or Mass Realty data. That's based on kind of a windshield survey that CMRPC conducted of 2 or 3 streets in a subdivision.
That depends on which one you're referring to. There are 2 different numbers.
You didn't
that
use
are
the same data sets for both of those numbers?
The number that we used for townwide was based off of census data. There's another number in there that is based off a sample of 3 streets that contained over 177 individual residents and about 50 some odd houses. And that one we used just to illustrate the point that if what you're building is these types of subdivision, the persons per household number can be substantially higher than it's going to show townwide. And that's the only reason that number was used. That was never used to suggest that that is the persons per household number everywhere in town.
But I mean, that's
this
kind of how it was
phase 2
pitched.
report, in the phase 2 report, we use only the 2.71 number, which is based off of your 2018 household count, based off your town census, and the current population based off of census data. So we didn't take that approach. We were only using that as an illustrative number, not as something that was supposed to be, wasn't what we were basing all of the figures off of. That was just one little piece that was supposed to be used just to show if you're developing these types of subdivisions, the population inside of that can be much higher.
What is our availability for follow-up questions, for follow-up comments, both from the public, from our elected boards, appointed committees, et cetera? What's our process? And I know, you know, where you were headed was, well, we made a bunch of recommendations. The town took one of them, which is, you know, the point that Mitch was getting to, I think, partially. We have other things that have been sort of thrown about a little bit, and I think that we have the planner here to talk about one of those next when you are finished. But relative to this document, what's our window?
Well, the grant is finished,
Right.
so that part of it is done. As far as fielding comments, we're available. So we're committed to seeing this particular report through as far as it needs to go. So if you want to circulate it for comments, if you want to bring them back, I'm perfectly happy to incorporate those and take the time to show up to other boards to answer questions if needed. So there's no point being that there's no particular window.
Okay.
We can make ourselves available for however long you guys need to have a document that you're comfortable with, that you're willing to work with.
Okay.
So.
I think we're going to end up having you back then.
Okay. No,
What
that's
it says,
I
what
sort
it
of
sounds like.
anticipated that.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Does anybody from the audience have questions for Mr. Barron from CMRPC? Look at that. You kind of looked at it.
And this will be on the website
Yeah, I mean,
tomorrow?
so again, is the board comfortable with sending this out to everybody, asking for comments?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Just,
and that
I would like
includes the
to
public.
clarify, the version that was sent out was a draft, and I had made some corrections between now and the time that I sent that. I did email you, Jeff, a version of it, that if you could use that version to post online and not the one that's there.
Dolores.
I didn't see it, didn't get it. I'll flip it to you tonight, Laura, okay?
Okay, and yeah, I can send it to her as well. I have her email.
If you can do that?
Okay.
Yeah, I
Even
can send
better.
that to you directly.
Thank you.
So this one she printed is the sort of final draft, and it has a few things in it that will be slightly different from what we post online.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's very nominal. There was a couple of corrections. I changed a couple of headers, and there was one piece of information that had been omitted that I have put in.
Okay,
So in the recommendation section.
Thanks for coming out, Ron.
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Ron.
We're moving on. Department updates. Our town planner. Come on down.
Yeah, good evening, Board. This is Dave George, Town Planner. I'll be brief in just a couple of things and follow up to what you just heard from the recommendations made by the CMRPC on the Phase 2 study. We have seen the recommendations that have been made, and we would like to just briefly discuss the housing production plan and the master plan, and also see if the Board has any interest in general in pursuing the housing production plan and the comprehensive master plan. A housing production plan is a plan which allows the town to achieve compliance with the 10% affordability for under the 40B program. Currently, the town is at 3%. A housing production plan is a community strategy which can help the town understand its existing housing stock and to determine what housing stock meets the future availability needs of a given of the community based upon demographic trends. A benefit of the housing production plan is that it is a proactive strategy to create the types of affordable housing which meets the town's needs at a local, at the very local scale, as opposed to a large development which may strain a town's ability to keep up with municipal services and supply infrastructure and so forth. The second one is a master plan. As the Board may be aware, a master plan is recommended that it be updated or revised every 10 years. The last master plan was completed in 2000. The master plan is a document consisting of maps, history, and analysis. It consists of a goals and policy section and sections on land use, housing, economic development, cultural, open space, and several other sections. A benefit of the master plan is that it is a proactive strategy, once again, to assist the town in making policy decisions related to each master plan element, as those elements exist separately, but also as those elements are connected. The housing production plan can serve as the housing element of the master plan. So as a result, if the Board is comfortable indicating whether it would like to pursue, in general, housing production and master plan, that information would be appreciated. We can then look further into funding mechanisms and lay the groundwork to accomplish the master plan and the housing production plan. Are there any questions that the Board has at this time?
Through the chair, would we bid those services out?
It depends on whether we work with our regional planning partner, the CMRPC, or if we don't. If we don't, it's my understanding they would have to enter into a competitive bid process for each of those plans.
To the chair. Did you see Ron's draft study here?
I did, and it's a direct connection to that work product that was presented tonight in brief.
One thing that jumped out at me that I don't think we discussed in any of either the steering committee or otherwise, not 40B, but 40S. The educational costs under Chapter 40S, that communities are reimbursed for any net cost of educating students living in new housing in a smart growth district.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was one of the proposals, the starter home district and reimbursements associated with that type of development. Those are other options that are listed there. I think certainly we can look at any and all options that are in there. I think we were looking in particular just to touch base on some of the big items, some of the ones that are best planning practices in planning departments and towns in the Commonwealth, things that are basic strategies in housing production and master plan are two of them, not to preclude any other strategy that might be appropriate.
I mean, my sense is I definitely think we had talked about a little bit generally at our goal setting was working to get the master plan updated, looked at again and updated and everything. And the housing production plan seems to go kind of hand in hand with that, taking a genuine look at our local Rutland economic situation and needs versus just going with the state kind of broad brush. So.
And would that be something that you, as the town planner, would be spearheading both of those plans?
Yes. Working
What?
with the boards, the planning board, any other boards and the public at large, yes.
Yeah.
So if the board were to agree to these in principle tonight, what would be the steps moving forward?
I think we would then continue to identify funding sources and then identify the actual process itself and look towards timelines and so forth.
Will that come back to a board for a decision?
If the board would like to operate that in that way, that's fine. I think initially just try to get a general sense on the big picture.
The master plan money is significant, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
And on the housing?
The housing is less so. Let's see. According to the CMRPC and some other information that I've become aware of, a housing production plan costs in the range of $15,000 to $20,000, but there's cost savings associated with it if you're working with a partner who has done long-range studies in town already, who has information.
Right.
That would cut down on some of it. A lot of it has to do with the level of outreach, citizen involvement, presentations, forums, and so forth. So it's a variable, but it's less than the master plan.
Okay.
Can we look to, I just got a housing production plan funded for the town of Milford, and it was funded through DHCD. Are there any funding streams? And DHCD picks the individual contractor that's on an approved list that they have working with your community based on prior experience. Are there funding opportunities that you're aware of to get something like that funded through the state?
Yes, I had a meeting with the CMRPC last week to just have a general discussion on strategy. Several funding options were proposed as possible. One was the community compact. The other one was the DHC, which you just mentioned, and a few other ones. If nothing else, the CMRPC can help us identify the options and the possibilities.
What kind of support do you need from us relative to moving forward with finding funding, which is obviously everybody's first choice?
If there's any funding source that you folks are aware of beyond the community compact, the DHCD, that would be great to know.
I can
Otherwise,
shoot you an email.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
And then, I mean, obviously Mike keeps us apprised of all the grants that he's working on. So that would obviously, once those are identified, would be made aware of it. I think that's smart.
Yes, and we're also trying to be aware of any grant opportunities that show up from time to time through our various sources as well. So.
Yep.
So I think the only thing to throw out there is there any consideration of including as part of this the master plan for the Heights, which is also somewhat dated?
Would that be a component of the overall master plan?
It's very separate right now.
Can we incorporate that, or is that like
I
a
don't know.
landmine to step into?
I would be thinking that it's a major area in town. I think as a component that would make sense because it is a designated zoning district. So to touch on it, its history, some of the efforts that have gone in to try to redevelop it, as a component would seem to make sense. It is more fixed in its form than other parts of town, and it does in fact have its own master plan, which guides future development, but to maybe help to publicize it, it can be refocused on as a section in the master plan, but it would not be treated in the same way as other elements that are less defined. It was intentionally designed to have a particular end in sight.
Right.
I think it makes sense to have it included as at least a reference that this exists and there's been, the history of the way it's gotten to where it is, and either here's its master plan or reference this master plan, so it's much more cohesive.
I think
and
so.
Together.
That sounds like a great idea.
So we should get RDIC looped in.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. See what they think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Motion?
Motion
Support?
to allow our town employees to search out funding as it comes up for the purposes of developing a housing production study as well as a comprehensive master plan.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dave.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thank you, Dave.
Good night.
Thanks. We have general updates from the town administrator. Laura, how did Mike leave it? He wanted them read for the record. Did he care who read them? Did he want us to go round robin? No? Yeah, I see that. Oh my gosh.
We want to each take 2 paragraphs.
Right? Like
Knock
in
it out.
school.
What do you think?
I think you should. I
We'll
think
see
you
who
should just
reads the
go and
best.
see how
How's-
comfortable you are.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Let's have a reading contest.
All right. July 29th, 2019. Members of the Select Board. Town Administrator update. Food Truck Festival. I would like to say thank you to everyone who helped make this year's Food Truck Festival such a success. We have heard nothing but positive feedback from residents and the Worcester Food Truck Alliance, and we are officially looking to make this an annual event in the town. Central Tree Middle School roof. I met with the representatives of the Wachusett School District and Select Energy this past week to discuss the status of the solar projects on the roof of the school buildings. During this discussion, the topic of the project for the roof at Central Tree Middle School was brought up. Select informed us that they had a roofing company inspect the roof at Central Tree Middle School, and they found it to be in good condition. Their roofing company is suggesting that rather than putting in a new $300,000 roof, as was the original plan, that Select perform $20,000 worth of repairs to the building. I'm having a second opinion done on the roof to confirm the accuracy of their report. Mr. Brian Hare from Select will be coming to a Select Board meeting in August to update the board on the status of the project, as well as discuss possible future projects regarding town buildings, for example, Public Works, Library, Community Center, Annex, and the Public Safety Facility. Weatherization of Community Hall. The work on Community Hall beyond done through the Green Communities Initiative, I think there's a typo there, being done through the Green Communities Initiative, began last week with the weatherization of the building. The work should help the building maintain a desired temperature and should help reduce our energy costs. Mrs. Laura Paradise is working with the department heads and the representatives from Green Communities to coordinate the remaining programs associated with the grant. DCR sewer use transportation negotiations. Director Buckley and I met with Director John Scannell and other representatives of the DCR Division of Water Supply Protection to begin negotiations on the town's new intermunicipal agreement for sewer transportation and treatment. These negotiations are ongoing, so specifics cannot be addressed in public at this time, but as information becomes available, it will be discussed further. Year-end. Town accountant Dan Hayes is in the process of officially closing out the 2019 fiscal year. Initial projections for the end of the year have us in the black, and we are in good financial standing. Select Board Chromebooks. Mr. Paul McKenzie from CM Geeks is in the process of setting up the new Chromebooks that the town ordered for the Select Board and Finance Committee. These are being set up along with the new Select Board email addresses, as the Chromebooks must have an email address associated with them. Those going to the Finance Committee will have generic Gmail addresses at this time, and the Select Board will have official townofrutland.org addresses. Congressional Farm Tour. Congressman McGovern will be hosting his annual district farm tour this week on Wednesday and Thursday. He has chosen Rutland's own Sap Castle at Overlook Farm, congratulations, Dick, as one of the locations for his stops this Wednesday. Crocker Communications update. Crocker Communications Company has begun the process of switching town offices over to the new phone systems that was previously passed at town meeting. There will be a brief internal trial period to allow employees to get used to the system, but should not interfere with members of the public trying to call employees until after the trial period is complete. Once completed, each line will be assigned an extension number that will be made available to the public once finalized. Viewpoint implementation. The town will be launching its Viewpoint online permitting software system to the public during the month of August for all permits issued by the Department of Inspectional Services. Great system, by the way. Once permits issued by Inspectional Services go full live to the public, the Department of Public Works will go into their internal trial period on the software. Clarification on public hearing and state law comments. Following the previous meeting of the Select Board, I undertook some research on questions that were asked and would like to provide clarification on a few matters that were discussed. Town meeting number 1. Town meeting adopted a bylaw that requires all appointed members of boards and commissions to be a registered voter in the Commonwealth. This is not a requirement of state law, but it is an existing town bylaw. 2. A public hearing is only required to be had if the Select Board is looking to remove someone during their term of appointment. A public hearing does not need to be held if an appointee's term of office has expired. Respectfully, Michael J. Nicholson.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Yep, nice job.
Does anybody have any comments or discussion? Obviously, Mike's not here to answer questions, but you wrote us a lovely note.
Just that the food truck festival was a success. I thought that was a great,
Yeah.
that was a great event. And that was all Mike? organize that?
Yeah.
I mean, really, I think that could be a good replacement for the Chowder Fest, you know?
I heard that multiple times that day. Did anyone else go?
We stopped by.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that it was, since we don't have the Chowder Challenge anymore. I heard that multiple times.
Yeah, I
Right.
think it's a
Huge
great
turnout.
opportunity, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great.
Yep, I think I
Enjoy it.
heard the turnout was higher than they were hoping for.
And I heard a lot of positive feedback that the event itself was free and that it was only pay for whatever you're
Right.
purchasing
Yep.
versus having to pay to get in and
Yep.
then also pay for what
which is
you're
great.
buying.
There were a lot of
Yeah.
people using the parks, a lot of
Yeah.
little kids
Yeah.
running around. It was
Yep.
really nice.
Yep.
It was really nice.
Craft fair, I like the arts and crafts in the middle.
Yeah.
I think it can expand, there's still another quarter of the field that
Yeah.
you could do
Mhm.
something different, so.
That was really nice.
So, just to recognize Mike for bringing that piece of Gardner here.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Now that that nice thing is over, on to old business. We have an appointment list that has been updated. You're looking at 004. We have multiple documents that go with that, and we are talking about Conservation Commission. My understanding is that all of the candidates are here. Is that correct? Could you raise your hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that correct?
There was an add-on today. Did you get that one? I talked to him, he's not able to make it,
Okay.
so there was another. He is? Okay.
So
Was
that
there
is
a
your
resume
number-
included for that, or was it just the subject line of the email?
Just the email. So
There
that's
was-
the-
So I spoke to him, the individual, and asked if he had a resume. He doesn't, and so I just took notes of what he had.
Okay.
It's available for viewing and discussion.
So that's the 04-6, okay. Green, Moore, Gentilucci, Jarvie, Lochner. We appreciate you all coming in. These terms are 3 years, and at that point, we do reappointments. It's rare, certainly in our community that's been growing, to have competition. In a lot of cases, we're begging people to do some of these jobs, and we fully recognize how much time so many of you, particularly even here in this room tonight, put into the very volunteer jobs that you do on these appointed commissions and committees. So we appreciate all of you being here. I think in no particular, actually, I'm not going to say in no particular order. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Mr. Crane. Yes. I was going to have you come up first, so you can.
How convenient. Is this what you'd like me to be?
I will.
Peter Crane, Nate's Way. At the last meeting, Selectman Skillings made a very clear and showed a very clear and obvious set of bias against myself and candidate Sean Moore. I therefore request that Selectman Skillings recuse himself from this set of proceedings.
Can I actually, do we have to make a motion on the request prior to discussion?
I'm looking it up
This is
because
not even something you guys can vote on.
I think it's.
Something he has to do or
He
not
has to
do.
decide, yeah.
Yes, I'm acting as parliamentarian again.
Oh, I'd like nothing more than to step out of this discussion, but I mean, there's no bias. There's nothing personal, there's no bias
Can I,
on my part.
at the last meeting we had, I made a request for public documents, public records from select board individuals and conversations they had concerning the four candidates for the position. Because it was my belief that this competition has been contrived because of bias. And so as part of that request, Jeff, on the 7th of July, did you have a conversation with the board chair via text and write to her, Sean, in reference to Sean Moore, who's got to go from the board,
Yeah, yes.
and that you wanted to FaceTime into the meeting because you thought that the vote would be contentious and you wanted Sean to be removed?
Did I want to FaceTime? I don't recall that.
Okay, because I have it here if you want to take a look at it.
Well, I'm not here to be deposed, so.
No, I know you're not here to be deposed, but I think it shows a clear bias. I mean, you also have, as part of that request, on the 11th, there was some back and forth, if you recall, regarding Sean Moore's business, that he had sent some information to Mike that he wanted to be heard. In response to those emails, you sent Mike Nicholson, our town admin, an email referring to Sean Moore saying, "What a maroon." That in itself shows clear bias, and I'll remind you that what a maroon, excuse my language, is a racial epithet that's derogatory towards people of color.
No, absolutely not.
That is
Absolutely
exactly
not.
what
No,
it means.
no, sir.
I have brought the Webster Dictionary definition
Not
if you'd like to
intentional.
take a look at.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there's a clear
No.
bias coming in on these appointments, and I think when you say you think an individual has been compromised, you're clearly referencing
explain.
Sean.
Can I explain that? Chair, I'll be happy to explain.
Here's the problem.
Mhm.
He has to make this decision. And at that point, the only thing that could happen would be for someone to file an ethics complaint to contest the vote. He's got to make this himself. So you can speak to this. You then
Yeah.
need to make a decision based on the request that was made. And then we need to move
I'd be
on.
more than happy to step out and not have any of this headache. But I'm going to tell you, I also chair the Managed Growth Steering Committee, and this is where I'm coming from. Okay. And when I said that there was a compromise, it was not against Mr. Crane. I thought that was clear.
No, that's
Apologize,
evident in the emails. And I also want to make sure, before that you continue, the emails that were provided were not submitted as part of your response to the public records request. And I want to make sure that in not replying with these, which clearly fall under the purview of that public records request, that you're not evading the public
No,
records
I don't have them to
request.
give you. I do
Why
my
wouldn't
business-
you have them if there's clear record of them here?
Well, again,
Because-
this is not a deposition.
It's not a deposition, but you have an email to a government official, which as a member of the board, you're supposed to keep for a period of either between 2 or 5 years. I forget what the state law is from the Secretary of State. Why wouldn't you have that email to turn in?
I provided 2 emails. I did
But they
a
were
search
not
of-
these conversations.
No.
So were you trying to avoid a public records request?
We're-
No, I'm asking a
we're
question,
way-
Sheila.
We're way out
Yeah.
of the purview.
We're not out of the
And in
purview.
point of fact, you're getting to the point where we would need to go into executive session. If you have
Why,
allegations
this is a
to make,
public document. I'm asking him a question based on public documents that I received that anyone can make a request for and look at.
Let me go back to what I wanted to explain.
you get one response, and can we call it a day at that point?
Absolutely not.
Well, what would happen if I'm not admitting a bias, but I'd be happy to recuse if that's what moves this process forward.
We can't tell you what to do, Jeff.
I'll be happy to recuse if that's what moves this. I mean, it's fine with me. If that's what you guys want. Yeah. That's fine, I'll step out. That's fine. Have at it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. You are formally recusing from the process for Concom appointments. Yes?
Sure, no
Okay.
problem.
We're
No,
going to have you
problem.
either sit in the body or you can leave the room.
We'll see. Yep.
Mr. Crane.
So now that that joyful thing has happened,
So
let's lighten up a little.
where I was headed was I'm happy that we had 4 candidates out of 5 arrive to speak with us. We appreciate it. We have done this in the past, as I think you've seen, to have people come in so that we can meet them and talk to them. That's all this is. And I am going in alphabetical order. So Peter Crane, C-R-A-I-N-E,
Thank you.
welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, about any relevant information you have to Concom, your history with Concom, anything
Well,
you like,
let's
and then before you
see.
ask
I've been
questions.
a resident of Rutland since 1998. I am married and have 2 children. We've happily lived in the northern half of Rutland all 20 years. I have been employed with the same company for 26 years, and before that for a number of other now dead computer companies. I think they're all dead. Oh, maybe not all of them. Computer companies come and go. You should know that. I am a computer software engineer by trade and by training. I took an interest in Conservation Commission when I was invited to a meeting because of the green slips so many of us in town have gotten about whenever you abut any any project that involves or is close enough to wetlands. I attended 5 or 6 meetings and then requested to be on, and the chair, Joe Delaquila at the time and still today, wrote the letter of recommendation. I have been serving for the past 5 years. I was originally appointed in December 2014. In truth, it takes some real time to be any good at Conservation Commission. When asked, Wayne isn't here, he may remember this, he might not. He asked the one question when I came before the board for my original appointment, and this question was, what qualifications do you bring? And I say, virtually none. But I'm going to go and study for the next couple of years to learn how to do the job well, and that's exactly what I did. It took me a year and a quarter, year and a half to actually become fairly good at it, which is a matter of understanding Mass General Law 310 CMR 10, which are the set of regulations that define the Wetlands Protection Act. It is my professional belief that the Conservation Commission has done as well as it can with the fact that we don't have a wetlands bylaw or a Conservation Commission bylaw. We're running solely on the state regs and state law, and that means that our ability to limit buildings within certain distance of wetlands is limited. I will also mention that we've started discussions about a wetlands bylaw so that we can fix that exact thing and create a more a wider limit from the wetlands that we, the Conservation Commission, can regulate. Let's see. Are there any other? I can't think of any other interesting facts for you. If you have any questions, please ask away.
Are you compromised? I just wanted to clear up the question that was asked 2 weeks ago.
My answer is not to my knowledge. I would love to say no, and I don't believe that I am. But if somebody can find some evidence of that, I'd love to hear it.
So you're a little bit of our resident bylaw expert.
Mm-hmm.
Can you comment on, has it taken 5 years for you to feel comfortable to begin a process of looking at whether or not conservation needs bylaws?
Conservation over my tenure has looked at a number of bylaws. Conservation Commission wrote modified the earth removal bylaw and created the Earthworks Board to regulate that exactly. We've spent a tremendous amount of time on what we at the time called like-kind soils. Some people call it dirty dirt. Some people call it contaminated. We still don't know what the right name is. That work's been picked up by the Earthworks Board, but that is a very, very difficult piece of legislation to write. And that's why it takes so long to do. So we didn't really start thinking about a wetlands bylaw. About a year ago when we started looking at it seriously. This came up during the last reappointments. And so we started looking straight away. We're still in the research phase because wetland bylaws are, frankly, a mess. They are bylaws that I really dislike reading, and so making one that's going to be a good bylaw and be readable by most people in town, it takes a certain amount of work.
Do you have any questions there?
I think that was my big one, was just kind of the timeline for a wetlands bylaw or conservation bylaw, or kind of moving that direction.
Can I ask you your thoughts on a conservation agent?
I don't know that we could put a conservation agent to use full-time or even close to full-time yet. I'm certainly not opposed, but it's more money we have to find, and so it's a matter of value versus cost. And in my mind, if we were able to hire one, let me just pick some numbers at random. If we were able to hire one half-time, we still might have a hard time coming up with 20 hours a week for that person to do.
Do you think it would be a good regional position?
I think regional would be, I think there are some possibilities there. I think it's still difficult. All regional positions are. But again, I'm not saying no, don't do it. I'm saying it's certainly in my mind worth considering at least.
But it hasn't really come up in serious consideration in the time you've been on.
No, it hasn't. It has not come up. We've mentioned it briefly, but never quickly enough.
Okay.
The truth is the current chair spends his time in town, and so whenever anything comes up, he goes off and investigates, helps. I know that he's helped a number of people fill out the wetlands forms. I know that he's on virtually every site walk. I'm on most, but not all of them. And so he's been the point of contact for DEP, for DCR, and for the public for a long time. And so it would, again, I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. I actually can see value in having a regular town employee as the point of contact for conservation matters.
Anything else?
No, I think this whole process is a charade, so.
I appreciate you coming in, Peter. We talked multiple times about doing this for everybody for a long time, particularly, for new people coming in or in cases like this, and we kind of got away from it for a time because it's hard to get people in here at night, and I know you came in from a vacation. I'm hoping you're going to just...
By the way, my wife is on vacation right now with a credit card, so I may not be able to afford to come home again later.
Hey. Okay.
The good news is she can't be watching right now. I'll pay for it later, I know.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Mr. Gentilucci. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Jared Gentilucci. I live at 65 Prospect Street in Rutland. I'm a new resident of the town. My wife and I moved here last fall in September, and we love it. Great town. And I am a civil engineer. I've been a practicing civil engineer for over 15 years. I grew up in Massachusetts, grew up mostly in Eastern Mass, but moved out to Worcester back in '07, and then just last year, like I said, moved to Rutland. I've been working for niche engineering for my whole career. I started there in 2001 as an intern. I went to UMass Lowell, and in 2004 got my civil engineering degree, and I've been with niche engineering ever since. I'm a project manager and a shareholder at Niche Engineering. Our main office is in Boston, but I work out of our Worcester office, which I helped open back in 2015. Living in Worcester since '07, I'd made the Boston commute, but I really wanted to work locally so I can be involved more locally. And so by opening the office, I've now been able to achieve that, and now also looking to potentially join local board as well. So I'm pretty experienced. I've presented to many conservation commissions over the years. I've worked on projects everywhere, mostly in Massachusetts, but everywhere from Boston to Williamstown. Presented to many boards over the years, conservation commissions, planning boards, zoning boards of appeals, on many different types of projects. I do mostly, lately, a lot of higher education work. I do a lot of work with the colleges and universities in Worcester and throughout Western Massachusetts. I've also done some work with higher education schools and colleges in Eastern Massachusetts as well. In my earlier career, I did a lot of work at Salem State, North Shore Community College. I've done some work at Suffolk University. But lately, I'd say for the last 10 plus years or so, I've done a lot of work locally, Worcester State, Quinsigamond Community College, Holy Cross, and I have current projects there now. So I've been on both sides of the table when it comes to being involved with a local board or a commission. Not only have I presented to many of them, I've also been on the peer review side. We're actually, for the town of Groton, we are the peer review consultant for the town of Groton. We have been for about 30 years, and I'm our project manager for all of those projects. So I'm constantly working with the town to do project reviews, both review of design work, review of construction, as well as helping them with developing and improving their local bylaws. I think that's probably about it. I'm certainly open to any questions you have. Happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are
You're
you currently a registered voter?
I am, yes.
Okay, so the first appointment that you were not a registered voter, and when did you register to vote here in town?
So I found out that in order to join a board, that you have to be a registered voter. I was not registered at the time. Once I found out, I registered about an hour later.
on paper, it looks like you've said you've had a lot of experience kind of with both being the consultant, the peer review side of things, and kind of knowing some of the state's regs and everything.
Yes.
What would your onboarding time be, do you perceive?
I'm very familiar with the Wetlands Protection Act, with the DEP stormwater standards. I've been a licensed professional engineer since 2009, and I'm also a licensed soil evaluator. I'm also a certified professional erosion sediment control. So a lot of the things that I deal with when I present to conservation commissions, usually my focus is related to stormwater, erosion control, protection of wetlands. Those are the things I typically focus on my project. So I am very familiar with the regulations that apply to a commission and those regulations that the commission wants to uphold. So I would say, with respect to onboarding, it wouldn't take me very long. I'm very familiar with all of that.
Okay. Did you do any research on any of Rutland's recent issues when it comes to either wetlands protection, conservation, stuff like that?
I have not. I don't know a whole lot about the history with respect to wetlands in town and any history on development in proximity to those wetlands. Just listening to the conversation tonight about the town doesn't have a bylaw but is looking to develop a bylaw, I think that's great. I've worked in a lot of cities and towns that do have bylaws, and I think they're extremely important to protecting those resource areas. So that would certainly be something I would be very much in favor of, and if I were to be appointed, would certainly help out with that process. But no, I don't know a lot about the history as to what's happened in town.
How
Go ahead, sorry.
how were you made aware of the opening?
I found it on the town website, and I reached out to Tamika Murphy via email just to see if there was still an opening available. When I looked, it said there was one seat available. So I reached out to see if that seat was still available, and I said I'd be interested in joining if it was. And that was back in, I think, April or May is when I reached out to her. Yes.
So when did you learn you had to be a registered voter to serve?
When I learned about the meeting tonight and the request for me to attend tonight, on that same day, which was, I don't have the exact day, I think it was within the last couple of weeks, I found out that I also have to be registered. I had not registered since moving to town. Which was my own fault, simply my own delay. It prevented me from voting at the town meeting, which I attended but did not vote. And so once I found that out, I registered within about an hour or so.
Have you met with the chair of the
No, I have
Conservation
not.
Commission? Okay.
I have not.
You heard me ask a similar question. It sounds like you kind of noted you've been on both sides of the table. Relative to the size of the town, what you know of it, having just moved here, what is your feeling about conservation agent, that position, and whether or not the town is an appropriate venue to have it, or should it be the chair if that chair is available, sort of as a money saver?
I think in general, it really helps the commission if they do have an agent, especially a strong agent. I know it's tough for smaller towns with smaller budgets to fund that position. I think if they can, it's really important, because I think just knowing I have a lot of coworkers that are also on boards, one of which is also on a conservation commission, and I know from talking to her that they have a very good agent, and she makes the process go a lot smoother. She makes the commission members' jobs a lot easier. But obviously there's a fiscal piece to it that has to be considered as well. But certainly if it works in the town's budget to have an agent, I think that can be very helpful.
We always encourage people to be active in their communities. You're new to town. It's wonderful to see you offering. You can see that the particular position that you've applied for is a competitive one.
Mm-hmm.
What made you sort of stick with the process and not say, you know what, I'll just back off and wait for something else?
For a long time, I've always wanted to join a local board, and I've always felt that Conservation Commission is my best fit, just based on my background, based on the work that I do professionally. And I think it's the board or commission where I can provide the most input, the most help, and can really help to make sure that the projects that come through that commission have good conditions applied to them, and that they are conducted in an appropriate way. And I've wanted to join a commission for a long time. When I lived in Worcester, part of the reason I didn't go join any boards or commissions in Worcester, to be honest, part of it was mostly because I present to a lot of those boards, they are quite busy, and I didn't think I'd be able to devote the time at that time to those boards. Now that, like I said, I now not only live and work locally, it gives me a bit more time in my schedule. And it's been at least 2, 3, 4 years that I've really wanted to join And ever since we decided that we were moving to Rutland, I said, once we move, I'm going to reach out and I would like to see if I can get a position on the Conservation Commission here.
All right then. Anybody else? Okay. Jared, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, as we noted, there was an application that came in this morning. Mr. Al Glockner, who sent a brief email stating interest, is not here tonight. I apologize, I can't let somebody else speak for him. So we're gonna move on. Next person, alphabetical order, is Mr. Kevin Jarvie. Come on down.
Hi, Kevin Jarvie, 80 Hillside Road. My history in town goes back, my family's history. I'm very proud to be a member of a 5-generation family here in Rutland. My great-grandfather in the early 20s purchased a farm on Hillside Road. Very proud to say our family still lives there. 5 or 6 years ago, started having kids, family. I wanted to get involved more in the town politics. My grandfather was on the zoning board and other boards. I couldn't even tell you. Both my grandparents are very much involved in the town, and I wanted to do it. It wasn't the right time for me with young kids, and a couple years later, I had an opportunity to put in and got elected to the Board of Assessors. And since that position came, I've been now 3 years on that board, and my original plan, as I mentioned 5-6 years ago, was to get into either the Planning Board or the Conservation Commission. And now my kids are a little bit older. A couple years ago, I stopped my full-time job, full-time work. I spent 26 years in the building materials industry, working on construction projects, top to bottom, architects, same type of thing, a lot of presentations and historical commissions and societies throughout towns. And 2 years ago, I stopped doing that and became a full-time farmer here in town. So I own a business here in town, Alta Vista Farm on Hillside Road. And I've put my sole focus into that. I try not to leave Rutland, to be honest. I am around all the time. I try to stay here as often as I can and do everything I can in this town to better it. And that was the reason that I decided that I wanted to put in for Concom, to try to help protect the wetlands and educate myself more on that is part of it as well, to better myself and learn more about wetland protection. And that was the main reason that I decided that I wanted to put in this year. I saw that there were actually 3 in the last couple of months. It was 1 and then 2, so that's when I put my name in, not knowing that it was going to be this. And I apologize. I don't mean to stand here in front of you in a charade. I take this very seriously, and I have since 5 or 6 years ago when I wanted to. And I mean, your comment, I feel bad that that's how you have taken this.
No, it has
that you
nothing to
think
do
it's
with
a
you.
charade.
It's on our end, not your end.
And I hope you know that. I didn't, if I had known 3 months ago, I would have waited till next year. I put in, I'm ready to go. I want to join this board. I went to the last meeting and had, I think, a great conversation with the chairman. And I can't speak for him, but I'm not doing this for any other reason than to help the town. And, my family's been here. My kids are going through school here. I hope that my great-great-grandchildren are standing up here in 100 years saying, I want to run for this board. There aren't that many families left that are 5-6 generations here in this town, and I'm going to do everything I can to have my kids stay through, and I want them to see me in these meetings, on the boards, being involved in the town, because I think it's very, very important. And I think that the work that I've done on the Board of Assessors has been nothing short of fantastic. And again, as we mentioned, I didn't know much about assessing at all before we got into that, and I can't stand here today and say that I have a full understanding of wetlands protection, but I can tell you that I will take any classes that are needed, and I'm looking forward to learning and educating more about it. And as the town grows, I want to try to help the town grow along with it. And I have the town's best intentions in mind.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions?
I'm just curious how you heard about the position and why you submitted your application materials directly to Select Person Stillings versus the Board Administrative Assistant. Were you solicited to submit materials for this position?
No, the reason that this one came up this time around was actually a friend of mine who had written a letter, didn't submit. We were going to run jointly for 2 positions. His name's Brian Bjorkland. we started the conversation, and then while we were having conversations, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we did a lot of the preambulation with Mr. Stillings on the town markers through the scouts. There's a lot of meetings. He's been to the house, my house, scout meetings. In all honesty, I think it was the conversations with Brian, myself, and Mr. Stillings is the reason that I just sent it over to him. And it was either in my basement during a scout meeting. I think that's when it was. And he just said to send me over an email. And that's when I sent over, I think originally I sent the email to his, it might have been his personal email, and then he replied back and said, please send it to this email, and I sent it over to that one. No, I mean, I wanted to run for Concom and or Planning Board long before Mr. Stillings was even a select person in this town, and that goes back 5 or 6 years ago. But it wasn't the right time with a 2-year-old and a 6-month. You know what I mean? Now they're a little bit older. I have the time, so.
Questions?
I guess it sounds like you'll have a little bit of onboarding time. You're not, as a farmer, you're familiar with the land, but you're not necessarily familiar with the state regs and everything. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely a fair statement. I mean, and you know, things that have come up in the past several years with, you know, just the farming regulations, 61A, APR, you know, through the assessors, the board of, I mean, every board in this town gets a little bit of everything, even though you're not directly involved in every single aspect of it. So, you know, as to say that I have a full understanding of it, no, but, you know, the homework's already there. I've already started the handbooks and printed all that stuff out. I've started the educational aspect of it, and, you know, whatever classes or courses are needed to pick up on the things. And it's no different than the Board of Assessors. You go through the classes, you sit there in front of it, you take all, you learn it all as you need to learn it, and you educate yourself as you need to educate yourself, and get out there and get wet and get muddy, I guess.
So I'm going to ask you the similar questions that I asked Jared and Peter, which is, do you have any comment on bylaws relative to conservation, and how do you feel about conservation agent?
I think that, you know, any bylaws that can be put forth in front of a town that can help protect wetlands or help protect any land, for that matter, I think should be seriously looked at, absolutely. And I think that putting more bylaws into play, and I have seen and I've read the town bylaws on multiple occasions, because you have to do that. There are a lot that need to be amended, and there are some that are missing. You know, there are some bylaws that we could have in there that we don't have, and I think that having bylaws for wetland protection is absolutely necessary. And I think that having an agent and can only better the Conservation Commission, having somebody there if the town can find, you know, the funds. We're dealing with the same thing. And the other board, where we're looking for somebody to have a full-time position, be it a regional with Hubbardston, or be it with Barry, or you have somebody you join up, and there are a lot of towns around us that are willing to do that, because there are a lot of towns that are in the same position we are, where they want to have part-time employees. You can, you know, split with 2 or 3 different towns and spread those out, and I think that those are things that we should absolutely look at.
All right. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin. Last one, Sean Moore, come on up.
Hi, Sean Moore, 3 Edson Avenue. I'm up for reappointment to the Concom. I have faithfully and diligently served the Conservation Commission for 9 years. I got on this board because I too wanted to give back to my community. When I first moved to Rutland, I saw an advertisement for the Open Space and Recreation Committee, and I went and applied for that and got accepted to that. And just so happened that the Conservation Commission meetings were held right after that. So being interested in nature, and back then not really knowing what the Conservation Commission does, seeing that it deals with wetlands and not really on for conserving, you know, but just only conserving the wetlands. I stayed in for a few months, almost maybe a year. I kept going to the meetings voluntarily until an opening on the board came, and then I submitted my interest to the board. Stood up in front of them like I am now. Back when the select board used to meet back in the annex in that little part back there, which was like half the size of this room. I feel since then my need to give back to my community has grown. I'm on actually now several boards of the town. It's all a learning process for each board. I'm also elected to the planning board. So I feel it's in my nature to give back to my community. I have children here. I'm a property owner here in town. That's pretty much it.
Okay, questions?
Do you feel like this reappointment process has been politicized by the board?
Personally, I feel that it has. I don't think I could go into that without, I guess, being in an executive session. I know there has been, I have submitted record requests and have had, I have evidence of bias that some of these select board members have towards other boards that feel that they're not doing their work, that they hold special interests more in favor than the town, which I completely disagree.
You're talking about the planning board.
I am talking about the planning board. There was a suggestion made by one of the selectmen that that the planning board in general does not rely on professional opinion, and that does not hold town interest. I guess the accusations, pretty much from what I take it, is that that the planning board, which I am a member of, so I imagine I'm part of this accusation, is pretty much in the pockets of special interests.
Which select person had that conversation?
Sheila Dibbs, and I have submitted that to my chair of the planning board, as well as ethics, and to the attorney general as well.
Do you think that the chair can be objective in her decision?
No, I do not. I was going to ask her for her to recuse herself as well, because I don't think through the text message that her and Mr. Stillings had, I don't think I could get a fair deal. I think that there is something going on with this board.
Leah, were you also part of that text chain?
No, I don't know what text chain it is actually.
Okay, because Jeff had referenced also reaching out to you in that text messages.
I talked to Jeff a couple times, but that wasn't anything about specific. It was just Concom in general, the appointment list in general, actually.
Okay, because I want to remind the board that creating a quorum outside of meeting is an open meetings violation when you're talking about deliberating on appointments.
So I guess my response is I have not received any public records requests at all yet, Sean.
Well, since it was a personal text message that was between you and I therefore submitted it to my chair back in October, I believe, and
Your chair is here.
Yep.
yes, he
Norm,
is.
would you like to comment?
No.
No.
But I'll just do it, and
Chair of
if I may.
Chair of planning, not chair of Concom.
Chair of planning, yeah. But let's stick to Concom. Like I said, I've faithfully been on the Conservation Commission for 9 years. I diligently attended all the meetings. I rarely do not attend a meeting or skip one. I feel I put my best foot forward when it comes to this town in every board that I am on. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Did anybody have questions?
Well, Sean, can I ask just,
Yes.
I mean, similar
Can you
to
come back, Sean?
I'm coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
similar to the question I think Sheila had asked of Peter, just kind of the what's your take on the town looking to
Yeah, I'll answer the
Pursue-
same questions because I know what they were.
pursue the
I
bylaws?
do think that we should have stricter bylaws. Actually, we don't really have any bylaws when it comes to conservation. I feel that the borders for the wetlands should be extended. It's more so on them just being wet and the water conservation. There's life that's inside those wetlands that's very precious to this world, as far as vernal pools and flora and fauna. And as far as having an agent, I wholly would accept an agent if we were to get one and could afford one. I don't really see why we couldn't. Maybe there could be some grants to help pay for it. But yeah, anything that could help, I'm for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It seemed like there were people who had statements about just the general process, or about Sean, or about.
Well, I just have a.
Come on up.
Nancy Nichols, Lizzie Lane. I just want to say that there's been a lot of comments about community here tonight. I have a nice thing to say about this community as far as I haven't been here very long, 16 years. Had a personal experience this morning with an adoption of my 2 nephews, and I have to say that this community really came together and welcomed these 2 little boys. But the reason I say that, Kevin, one of his den leaders, how about a sense of community? Any thought to enlarging the board? A lot of times it's not a good thing to enlarge a board because it involves too many people. But I served on conservation for 4 years. I had the pleasure of actually bringing Sean and Peter on board and watch their hard work. They're willing to listen, willing to learn. They're not biased, but maybe to stop some of the bias, why not just petition, or however you have to do it with the bylaw committee, to enlarge the board? I can't think of a better board that should be enlarged. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot to learn, a lot of hands-on work. Maybe if it was bigger, we could bring some of that sense of community back. I mean, I was disheartened with the last meeting. I thought it was sad. We don't have to be that way. We don't have to be the rural turning into the suburban and losing our sense of community. Just a thought, too.
Thank you.
Bring it up.
Thank you. Did anybody else have a? Come on up, Carol.
Oh, sorry. Carol Martens on Pleasantdale. I just have a question. Is this going to be a process for all the boards where you're going to bring in each person when there's an opening, if there's more than one person, or even if there's just one person, to speak before the select board?
I can speak from a historical perspective. It's something we've been tweaking and trying to improve upon for as long as I've been doing this. And at one point, we were actually being a little bit better about, even if it wasn't a contested seat, to have the person come in and introduce themselves and tell the community. It wasn't just us, to tell the community something about themselves, and so that we would be able to welcome them on and ask any questions and have any questions answered. We got away from that a little bit, again, because we're asking people to come in for yet another night, and some people felt like, if it's not contested, what's the point?
Well, if they're interested enough to be on the board, I think we should all be willing to do that. If that's the case, and it's not also just for the select board, but for the community at large, if we know, if someone's interested enough to pay attention, know what's on the agenda, and to come in, I would appreciate 2 things as a resident. One, that everybody who's going to talk gets 4.35 minutes, or whatever it is, give them 7 minutes, but we don't have somebody go on and somebody's just, everybody should have an equal hearing. And I would like to see that maybe the questions that the select board ask have to do with their capability of fulfilling the job. Not the kind of questions of, when did you see it? You know, those kind of things. I don't care. Maybe some people care, but as far as me, I want to know how good a job they're going to do on the board. So it's not just for the select board, it's for all of us too, of what we're hearing. So just to even out the process a little bit. And I had not heard anything of what Nancy said, but I agree. Enlarging the board is a great idea. Our community's growing, and maybe we need that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Joe Becker, 18 Crestview Drive. I actually, Nancy makes a good point, but another, maybe to add on to that point, is contingent members, non-voting members. And one benefit to that I've seen in the past is they get involved in the process, and when a seat opens up, they've been involved in the process, and they can kind of slide right into the role and have that experience. But the real question I had, because it came up in the last meeting that I viewed, and I found it curious, and I don't know if any of the 4 people vying for the seat could help clarify in my mind, because I'm a novice when it comes to wetlands. I don't know much about it. but the statement was made, and I think it was in relation to some issues, Leah, you had heard from town residents about building in certain parts of the town, and in response, there was a statement made that just because land is wet doesn't mean it's wetlands. So I'd like to see if the candidates could maybe explain that a little bit further, just so the town in general can understand the process they go through and what that statement means.
So I'll go reverse with that. Sean, do you want to answer that first?
Well, it goes, it depends on soil and the testing of the soil. Soil has to be, it's called perked, and it meets certain requirements according to state law and federal law to meet wetlands. And that's pretty much it.
Kevin?
I was right along the same. I would think that maybe seasonal as well, and I'm not sure, but as what I've heard is that, you know, sometimes your pools can come and go, but depending on where they are, and you park at different times.
Okay. Thank you. Jared?
Typically, wetlands are identified based on a few different factors. Some already mentioned: soil conditions, vegetation, and I've worked with, me personally, I've worked with a lot of wetland scientists over the years. That those professionals are usually pretty good about identifying wetlands. I understand the statement because I've heard it before, that just because something is wet may not mean it's a wetland. That is true. There's fluctuations in groundwater throughout the year. There's fluctuations with water bodies throughout the year. But typically there are state requirements through Mass DEP as to how to identify wetlands. And those are, in my opinion, those are relatively clear. I'm not a wetland scientist myself, but working with them over the years, seeing the process that they go through is a fairly standard process to identifying wetlands.
Peter?
This is an incredibly complicated issue, unfortunately. And if I were going to do it right, it would have taken me about an hour in PowerPoint, and you all know what happens when that starts. What complicates things are the science behind a wetland and the science behind a watershed, and how those two things overlap. And those are different sets of regulations with different sets with different organizations in the state managing them. But to simplify it as well as I can, I don't even worry about the plants. I worry about the soil, because the soil is unambiguous and the plants are ambiguous. Because wetland plants migrate away from wetlands and upland plants migrate down to wetlands. It gets complicated. And so for me, the test is with a coring tool that we frequently have. When we do site walk, we get one out there with us, we take a core sample, we look at the dirt, and it's very obvious from the dirt. When the dirt is black and rich and fertile, that's not a wetland. When it's a light gray, generally, that means it's a wetland because it's actually anaerobic soil. That's the simplest way to determine whether or not you're standing in a wetland or not.
That is the bottom line, definitive definition of a wetland is established by the soil. Plants are very subjective, you know, and the way it's in the regulation, it could be 50% wetlands plants and 50% upland plants, and how do you make the call? You know, I mean, and be fair about it.
Okay.
So the definitive test that the state, that the DEP recognizes is the soil test, where you just compare it to a Munsell color chart when you do your test bore. I mean, we did that down on Palmagussit Road for those 5 houses that everybody got up in arms over. We did the core samples down there.
Thanks.
Those houses are not in wetlands.
Thanks,
Right?
Jared.
Nothing is in wetlands. They're next to wetlands.
Thanks, Joe. Could you just identify yourself for the camera?
Oh, Joe Delapola, Molten Mill Road.
Thank you. Yes, come on up.
Good evening. George Carizzi, 212 East County Road, Rutland. First of all, there's been some suggestions to increase the size of the board, and although that might be good, the statute doesn't permit it. So the maximum size of a Concom is 7 members. So you guys can check that out with your own town council. I'm okay with that. The statute is Chapter 40, Section 8C. And unfortunately, the statute provides a maximum size. But I do have a question. I know that there are some members of the Concom, been serving a long time. They've applied for reappointment. Has this select board requested or obtained recommendations from the current board, chairman of the board, and what's their recommendations?
Yeah, so Mr. Delacour is here. We have a recommendation to reappoint the 2 existing members. And I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, at this point, you declined to interview the others. Is that correct?
Did I what?
You haven't interviewed the others.
You
I did
declined.
have a conversation with Kevin Jarvie.
Did you decline to interview them?
No, I did not. I was not asked to.
Okay, but you didn't, okay. Didn't talk to the other applicants.
The one applicant that showed up at our meeting, I stayed behind with him after the meeting was done, and we had a fairly extensive conversation.
Okay.
And the recommendation of the chair or the board
Is to
reappoint
Yep.
the people who've served for 5 to 10 years.
5.
5
And
years on
9,
one
I
and
believe.
5 and 9.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so as was just noted, the max is 7 members. We currently maintain 7 members. I want to say I did look at a community that had some non-voting members on it, and I can't find it tonight, Joe. So I'm not sure what that looks like. We'd have to look into that further. Does anybody have any more questions? Thank you all again so much. Yeah.
Just one comment on the adjunct members. That, all you have to do to get those is vote it. Concom has to vote.
You would vote it, not town meeting?
No.
All right.
It's an unpaid volunteer position.
Well, they all are, but so for example, if we could have increased, say, from 5 to 7, that would have to go to town meeting, Nancy.
Yeah, we could have,
Yeah.
we could vote to add 3
Yep.
adjunct members.
Okay.
I would just give it to you guys for, final blessing.
Right.
Why would that have to go to town meeting?
No, I was saying as an example, and this is on the MAC website, if we had a commission of 5 and wanted to increase it to 7, that would go to town meeting.
Yeah.
Can I just ask why that's required? We don't have a bylaw now relative to Concom.
Well, we're following the state on the,
That's
which you referenced.
That's increasing from 5 members to 7.
Yep.
You see that? Okay.
Yeah, which we're not doing. We're at the max. You were 100% right. I've seen that as well. Yes.
Just a point of clarification, I didn't understand what Nancy was talking about. I'm talking about increasing the select board to 7, not 5.
Oh.
I think,
Sorry,
Good idea.
we all thought you were talking about
I
conservation.
know, I apologize.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Motions? Let's do these as individual seats. I'll take a first motion.
Wait,
No?
just to clarify.
Yep.
We have a policy in place we've adopted as a board
Mm-hmm.
that applicants require a recommendation from the chair to be appointed.
Can I, if I may?
We do. It doesn't say that the board has to follow that recommendation, but that we want that recommendation as part of the
Okay.
process.
Okay. I mean, it's bad optics. These positions weren't contested when we received the original recommendations, and we kicked the Concom reappointments specifically down the road when we had approved everybody else for everything else. And we had a select person that indicated in the last meeting that he was willing to break the law to get appointees on the board, and now we know it's to replace Sean. The optics of not following our own policies is just bad.
So, obviously I was on the phone at the last meeting. I heard the interaction. I clearly missed some things not being here physically. I don't know what to tell you.
It's on YouTube.
It is on YouTube.
It's been viewed 1,000
Add it-
times.
Add it to my list. Relative to the appointments, I would want to note, and we can talk about this, some of the questions came up in regards to, we'll do all of them. So Mr. Moore sent his I will be seeking reappointment note into Mike Nicholson on May 25th. we received for Kevin Jarvie, June 5th, June 6th, 5:58 a.m. It came into the office to Mike's email as well as mine, and that was as noted from Jeff Stilling's email. For Mr. Glockner, it was sent in just this morning, 8:01 a.m., forwarded from Mr. Stillings. For Mr. Crane,
That was a verbal.
yeah, I think you gave a verbal to several people.
Yes.
Pretty early on. And then for Mr. Gentilucci, and tell me if this is right, so you originally sent an email on May 16th?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and Tamika responded to you on May 16th saying, thank you for your interest in joining the Conservation Commission. I've shared your email with the chairman, Joseph Delaquila, and we will be in touch. All right. Questions?
If I may put a small twist on Mr. Gentilucci's application.
You think he was applying for the, at that point, vacant seat?
Yes, that's correct. The one that we had put Skip in through the process that was just held up here.
We should also note at the time he wasn't eligible to serve in the position.
Right, which he hadn't been told of.
Well, I mean,
I
okay.
I was here when we built that policy. I would note for the record, and we just had this conversation about how some of these boards and committees and commissions were begging people to do it. If there were anyone whose only flaw was that they needed to go and register to vote, for me, I'd have them do it.
Well, then take
And
it
then
out,
we would
take
talk
it out of the
about it.
bylaw then.
Well, and it's a policy. It's a board policy. We can. But I think at the time it was considered to be an appropriate requirement of someone who was going to be serving.
But we don't think that's a requirement anymore.
It is a requirement. The question is it a requirement for the applicant or is it a requirement for the person who is being seated? So again, if we have 20 highly qualified people come up to us for vacant seats on in any other situation that's uncontested, it would never occur to me to not turn to that person and say, we can't appoint you until you register to vote. If you don't want to register to vote, we can't consider you. But I would never have considered that to be an insurmountable boundary. It's something that needs to be communicated to the applicants if they're not, and other people can have other opinions about it. That's how I approached it when we made that policy. If you feel like it's too onerous,
It's a
we should
bylaw.
revisit it.
It's a bylaw.
But it's not state law. I mean, it's a
It's a
town
bylaw.
bylaw. It's a
Bylaw.
town bylaw,
It's a town
but it's not
bylaw.
an MGL law.
Right, but is it still then not a law?
No, I'm not saying that. But there was a lot of comments that it was an MGL state law, and it's not an MGL state law. It's a town bylaw. The MGL state law actually says that it's
They defer to the town.
correct.
Right.
So I'm not
So
saying
we're okay with breaking the town bylaw, but not this, not a state.
I'm not saying that, but I'm
Okay.
just pointing out that it's the MGL state law does not specify. It's the town bylaw that specifies that.
Okay. So
We
clearly
also-
that's less of a hurdle that anyone who wants to break a town bylaw, I guess we'll go
No,
ahead and
that's
do that.
Breaking a town bylaw.
No, I mean, if we're ignoring that, when
No.
these candidates came up as a vote for appointment and reappointment at the last meeting, and the candidate was not eligible. So we're kind of grandfather, we're counting the fact that when he applied, he was not eligible, but now he's eligible?
I will, hold on,
Okay.
I will stand by that. In any other situation where I'm looking at an appointment list and somebody says to me, you know what, that person, highly qualified, eminently qualified, has been an asset to the town for years, isn't registered to vote, I would hold that appointment, call that person, explain to them what had happened, and give them the opportunity to register to vote. I would not use that as a barrier. That's me. I would hold off on that appointment, not break the law, hold off the appointment, try to fix it, and if it's not fixable, then we move forward.
Okay.
That would be my take on it, but everybody else is going to be different.
Well, I just think back to some of the other town bylaws that we have that we approve pending X, Y, and Z. So,
What do you mean?
No, not bylaws. I think you mean we've made motions where
Well,
it was,
yes,
well,
sorry.
we are okay with signing this, assuming that the following information comes in. I think she's relating it to that.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
yeah.
Mr. Delaquila.
Just to clarify a little bit, if there's a town bylaw, it is against state law to break a town bylaw.
Okay.
Just so you understand.
I'm
I mean, I
hoping
go
this
back
is-
and forth there a minute ago.
I'm hoping
It's-
this is a moot
It's
point.
kind of a matter of semantics more
Yeah.
than anything else.
Yeah.
If you have a town bylaw, Mass General Law tells you must enforce
Honor the town bylaw.
Well, right, because enforcement goes along with, sure.
Just
I'm hoping
try
that
to
that's,
settle that, I hope.
yeah, I understand that that was a big bone of contention last time. I'm hoping that's a moot point. Again, I would argue every day that I would hold an appointment for a qualified person pending that request. If they didn't fulfill it, we move on. I would never throw that person out, again, getting back to the state we've been in, which is begging for people. In this case, it's competitive, and so it became one of the criteria, and I do understand that.
So if I can answer Leah's question about contingencies. And in most cases, it's okay to make a motion based upon other things occurring. The problem with appointments is that our appointment bylaw specifically says that the appointee must be a registered voter in the town from a date of appointment through service, through the term. The date of appointment is the date of your vote.
Yep.
And therefore, you can't be contingent on
Okay.
becoming a town voter, because that's the violation.
Yep. Thank you for that.
Ready for,
I do have a question. When was this appointment first to be made?
so
When did
we,
this first come on our agenda? Is that what you were?
Yes, because it seems that this meeting has been just, as you said, Mitch, kicked down the line in order to accommodate certain whatever. We were supposed to be appointed on the 15th, and yet that was held off because it didn't seem to some select members' purview to appoint members at that time.
yeah, we could go back through all the minutes. I think every meeting that came up, there were Conservation Commission questions, and it's been a good 6 weeks. We try to do appointments before July 1st, which is when the
Okay, so I
appointments
just-
expire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just for transparency.
I don't know that it's the only time that some appointments have been held up for various reasons and things that needed to be addressed or corrected, but yeah, it's a good 6 weeks since we've started. And I mean, Laura sends out the letters to all of the board, commissions, committees
And
early.
at that time, everybody who wanted to apply was here at that time. And then it kind of seemed like, well, this is my opinion, it just seemed like the board kept pushing down the line just to make sure, people had their ducks in a row.
It got even more gray too with Skip, because he had apparently wanted to be appointed while still on the board, right, Skip?
That's right.
Yeah, and so there was that vacancy that got filled.
And if I recall, you said that was to your mistake that you
I
did
didn't-
not appoint him?
I absolutely misunderstood. It would never have occurred to me that Skip would want to be on both at the same time.
You
I just
didn't ask.
assumed.
Did you ask?
I guess I didn't, Skip, did
No.
I? And he didn't bring it up even while he was still up here. And clearly we should have, because I think it would have.
Oh, yes, I did. I brought it up when I was on the board.
You brought it up to say you were applying, and we didn't clarify it.
Did you write a letter to the board with your intent to apply?
Yep,
Yes,
yep.
When did that letter come in? Or go out? When did you send it out?
I have no idea.
Before your term was up, I think. We
Way
could
before
find
I
it.
was-
Yeah.
Yeah, way before my term was up, and I did the thing with Anita to make sure everything was
Right.
ethically right and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I believe it was April.
I'm
that-
sure,
that
yeah,
you sent the letter.
that sounds about right. And, and again, there were several, it's water under the bridge. I'm entertaining motions, one seat at a time.
Motion to reappoint Sean Moore to the Conservation Commission,
Do I have-
with noting that there is a recommendation from the board chair,
From the commission chair?
from the commission chair.
Okay. Do I have a second? Okay, hearing none, that motion fails. Next.
Motion to reappoint Peter Crane to the Concom, noting that he also has the recommendation from the chair as required by select board policies.
Is there a second? I'm going to second. Is there any discussion? Peter, I'm going to make it abundantly clear my questions are exactly what I would like to see changed. moving forward on the Conservation Commission. I think we should have had an agent long ago. Just doing a search, Paxton, Holden, Sterling, Westminster, Winchendon, Southborough, Ashburnham, some of which are smaller than us, all have conservation agents. We have the money, we can do this, and it's an appropriate time to do it. Holding off on filling these professional positions has done nothing but hurt us. I feel strongly about that. So in part, it was one of my questions for a reason. The bylaw question also for a reason, and I fully hear what you were saying. Earthworks was an enormous undertaking. I don't think it's done. Westminster and Winchendon did manage to put bylaws together, Westminster more recently. I think we've got some best practices to go on here, and certainly now that we have the planner in place, I think we've got a better opportunity there to do it. I do consider you our resident bylaw, if not expert, the person who is most dedicated to it. You've really put the time in, and we so appreciate it across multiple boards, committees, commissions, even when you're not on them. And I think that your presence is invaluable there. So, all in favor? Let's do a roll call.
Ricity, aye.
Whiteman, aye.
Goodbye. Congratulations. Next, we have one more seat to fill.
What about the 5th applicant? If we're going to interview everybody, we had somebody come in today, we're not doing that.
I'm fine with putting this off even more, and we absolutely could do that. But at some point, you're right, do we need to tweak our policies? And it gets back to Carol's question, which is we've been tweaking these for a while. Is it time, now that the town is big enough that we are seeing competition, to set a really hard deadline? Maybe, but we haven't done that yet. So this is a gray area. I could really go either way.
This is manufactured competition.
It's pretty much the same all the time. We're either begging for people to apply, or it's a competitive process.
Or we're getting people that
unfortunately
agree with certain members of the board to apply for whatever purposes that may have.
Mitch, you've been on for 75 days now?
Mm-hmm.
I have zero issue with Sean Moore. He and I go back a really long time, and our kids are in school together. Sometimes people just want to see changes in the way a committee or a commission is moving in a direction. It doesn't mean I think that anybody who's seated on it has done a bad job.
You just say change is good after
Change
long
is
periods
good.
of consistency?
Sometimes change is good, and we hear that whether it's elected or appointed.
So are you not going to be running again after 13 years on the board?
Maybe.
And how does this relate to our Concom appointments right now?
Well, it's a valid point, which is, does a town always go a certain way?
Yeah.
And these are always hard, and there's not that many people in the room. The last time this happened when I was here, it was awful. And maybe it being ugly and awful is unavoidable. I wish that weren't the case. I wish it weren't a direct reflection on, I must not like them, or there must be some conspiracy theory, or
No, there's public records. It's not conspiracy theory.
I mean what I said.
Mm-hmm.
My questions are exactly what I want to see changed, and see the Conservation Commission move forward. Certainly, Joe, I think these are not secrets. You and I have had these conversations as well.
When?
Over the years, multiple times. I've asked you about conservation agent.
And then you turn around and walk away from it.
Really?
Yeah. I've made numerous attempts to converse with you, only to have you walk away.
Okay.
Pull out your phone and pretend you're talking on the phone.
You and I had it doesn't matter. Okay.
The best conversation I had with you was before you were on the board, I was donating dog food to Sweet Bee. That was the best conversation you and I ever had.
The irony is, you were the first person I interacted with when I was elected. Do you remember that?
Yep, I remember that phone call very well.
Yep.
Hysterical person screaming and yelling and swearing at me.
What's that?
A hysterical person screaming, yelling, and swearing at me.
Your neighbor.
You. Because my neighbor, who was so friendly, decided to stop you from going out the street.
Oh, no, it was, okay.
I remember that
We're
phone
off
call
topic.
very well. Yeah.
Is there a motion? Or what are we doing? We have one more seat to fill. And we still have agenda items to get through. No more motions, you're done, yeah?
I'll make a motion to appoint Jared Gittalucci to the Conservation Commission.
Is there a second? I will second for discussion. Is there any discussion?
My reason for making the motion to appoint Jared is his experience. I think he seems to know a lot of the ins and outs of both sides of the table. So that's my
Yeah, Jared, I think with your background that you're showing us, you're a great addition to this commission. You will have some ramping up to do. I hope you start looking into the history a little bit. Glad you registered to vote. Hope you will actually vote, but that's not our business. As part of this discussion, I would just say that, again, reiterating to Peter what I said to Peter, say it to Sean, 9 years. I would have liked to have seen more forward movement. I'm still hoping that there will be relative to the hiring of a conservation agent and some bylaws.
9 years you see forward movement for what?
For conservation agent and bylaws. Yep. And I want to take Joe's.
Do you not think that, if I may, since you're kind of leaning this way, do you not think that any of these members have not done their due diligence or their duties to the Concom and to the town? And I ask you too, Leah, do you?
No, and this is what I said in the meeting last time, that I think that the people that I interact with most are not able to come to all of these meetings and sit here and speak. And there are some questions and concerns as the town has grown. And it's not finger pointing at saying that what Concom has been doing is not right. There's questions. And I think that we have an opportunity to bring some new perspective in. And we've added Skip with the wetlands push. And I think that it's not a bad thing. And it's not anything personal. I've had this conversation with a couple people. I'm trying very hard to do what I think is best for the whole town. And that might not be what's best for me or what's best for Sheila or you or my neighbor. It's the town as a whole. Will I get it right? Will I get it wrong? Yeah, I'm going to get it right. I'm going to get it wrong. So for me, it's not anything personal.
You never said it was.
Can you just clarify, because maybe you didn't realize you said it, but when you said 9 years.
For Sean.
People to take it, like, in 9 years, I didn't see an agent come on, like it was his fault. Because I don't think that's what you meant, but
No, you're right, I apologize. You're right, I apologize. I think it's coming back to is it a time for a change? Again, there are things I would like to see the conservation move forward with doing. I think this will hopefully, move that forward a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
And can I just ask one more? If they do decide to take on non-voting members, is that something that board votes on or you guys vote on?
The commission would, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna need to all look into this. Joe made a comment that the commission would vote to add some adjunct non-voting members and then send it to us for kind of like a ratification. That might be the process. We haven't done that in a long time. It's funny, we just lowered your number.
Yeah.
We never had enough people to do it.
Yeah, so that'll be a nice problem to have if that's the case. And I certainly hope that, Sean would consider it. I know he enjoys going to those meetings. He has that 9 years worth of information and history to go on, and so having that in the room is going to be absolutely still a help. So yeah, I hope we can do that.
I only would ask one question: is there any communications between the select board and the Conservation Commission that ever outlined any of these things that you're outlining today? Is the commission not accomplished?
No, I'm asking.
We have received zero guidance from the select board as to what the select board would have us do, right? What type of goals they would like us to achieve. We've had zero. all right? And every time I've tried to talk to somebody about it, you know, like a wetlands bylaw, all right, or increasing the protection zone, all right, people walk away from me and ignore me. And yet you sit here, all right, and say that's what you want. But you have never communicated that, and when I have tried to communicate that, I'm ignored.
So, I
All right,
think
so,
that was
there's a little disconnect here. I would certainly hope that going forward, all right, that the select board, when they get a complaint, especially when they get a complaint, would forward it to us so we could address it. All right, because we addressed complaints almost immediately. Skip and I were out addressing complaints yesterday. All right, because somebody took the time to call the Concom and not call you because you don't tell us you got a complaint. Right, if you've even got any complaints. I've heard you say, not you personally, the board as a whole, say that they have complaints. Right, those complaints have never been, we've never been given the opportunity to address them. All right, you people as the leaders of the community, all right, seriously need some management 101 courses. Right? You can't expect people, whether it's a board, the boards try to operate within their parameters, within the laws that are laid out for them. All right? Absent guidance from you folks, anything extra is tough to come by. And you've never given us the feedback. You've never said, this is what we'd like to see. Can you work towards this? All right? And enter some type of dialogue with the board to accomplish those common goals. And I say common because what you're saying is exactly what we've been saying. But when, you know, one board is not listening to the other. All right? So from my perspective, all right, the Board of Selectmen has failed miserably, all right, in their leadership roles. And unless and until that changes, you're gonna see the same thing happening to the next Concom or the next planning board or the next council on aging or whatever you might have. All right, because goals, wishes and goals are not communicated, at least to me. From my perspective, we've never been able to have that communication.
Okay, so I think as a general rule, and there are people in the room that can correct me if I'm wrong, historically, the board has not given a set of directives to any of our appointed boards, commissions, committees.
Right,
I
so
think,
don't complain that you're not getting what you want. Because if you don't tell people what you want, none of us are mind readers.
So wait, are you saying that your working relationship with the board is not so good?
A whole lot less than desirable, to put it politely.
Okay.
so we've done a goals and objectives meeting internally for ourselves. It's certainly something that we could do with you cooperatively. I don't see a comfort level in anyone doing it as a, we're gonna meet and you're gonna be on our agenda and we'll talk about you and then send you a letter. That doesn't
Right.
seem
We
like the
don't
right
need
way
a
to
selectman
go.
coming to our meeting and sitting like a lump on a log, all right, and writing notes about who said what.
Okay,
All right, that's what we get now, and we've only gotten that twice in 2 years,
okay.
all right? So we're not getting the communication back to us, all right? The select board member that is, I'll leave that unnamed at this point, that is assigned as our liaison, right, has come to one meeting last year and one meeting this year. And in both of those meetings, he might have said a total of 5 words. Most of them were high.
I mean, I think it'll be helpful when we get closer to the point where the meetings are all televised, to Mitch's point about telling me, the meeting was on YouTube. I
television
wasn't there and I should have been watching it on YouTube. I think that'll
The
help
fact
too
that
for the
meeting is
people that can't
televised
make
does
it.
not-
It's also an article in the Landmark,
That's,
front page.
Yeah, no, I did read that.
televising a
meant-
meeting
I meant
is-
to the point of people
generally
not
makes a
coming.
meeting more polite. That's all television does.
No, it was just speaking to people being able to attend and see what's going on with you and getting back, maybe that's one of the goals and objectives to talk about, so we can certainly do that.
And I think that might be maybe some of it is a misconception because people aren't able to attend all the meetings. So,
It doesn't come down to attending a meeting all the time.
no, I'm
What I'm
not,
saying is, when you get a complaint,
I understand.
forward it. Tell us
understand.
about it. all right? And we'll tell you, we will get back to you and tell you what our resolution was,
Okay.
all right? Because 90% of the complaints are because somebody thought,
Right.
all right? When there is actually science behind it, all right? And there are times when we can help people out, there are other times
Okay.
that we cannot.
Thank you. We do have the open motion and the second on the table, so I apologize. I let that get a little off topic. So there's a motion for the 3-year appointment of Jared Gentilucci with a second. Is there any more discussion on that topic? Roll call vote. All in favor?
Waitman, aye.
Dib aye. All opposed?
Reciting no.
Okay.
You need three
Welcome.
ayes.
This is our quorum now with the 3.
No, you're a 5-member board. Whether you're present or recused, you still need 3 ayes.
And Peters doesn't hold either, right?
Yeah, then we'd have to.
I think you should check that, just to be safe.
I believe we're a 3 quorum now. That's our minimum quorum right here. We need 3 to hold a meeting with a 2 vote.
Right, to hold a meeting.
Win, yeah.
But I'm talking, you might want to just check that. I had a conversation with Margaret about that at one point. Just
All right.
for your own safety.
So the vote will be in the record. If there's something wrong with it, obviously we're gonna revisit it and you'll all hear from us. Kevin, thank you for applying. We hope you will apply again. We do have a farmer on conservation. So, with the ramping up you would have to do and the amount of work you already have with assessors, maybe, hopefully it'll be a better time later. Or hopefully you'll continue to talk with the chair, and the 2 of you can be adjunct members of some kind, and that would help along with the learning process, especially if it's something you want to do in the long term. Okay. I'm moving on. 032, interdepartmental transfer request. We have an 03201, 02, 03, and 04. So it's basically the request with some backup. I know you all got this as part of your packet, so just as an FYI for the people who are here, this is a request for an appropriation transfer from ambulance wages to public safety purchase services in the amount of $7,000 for painting of the exterior of the public safety building, and he has a written proposal from Mullen Painting of Rutland. It has been approved by the Finance Committee as of 7/11. Any questions?
So the backup is just, I think the question on this was if work, Mitch, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if work could be donated or if we could work with the sheriff's community team or something. Was that the questions that I think we had, right?
And the fire chief explained why we can't.
So his letter indicates the question regarding donations, which they've already gotten a lot of donations this spring. I understand that from business partners, but that was for landscaping. And then that was sort of the answer to that, which was no, we've sort of maxed out on our donations in that respect. And then the sheriff's community service team responded. They are busy right now working in area schools during summer vacation, and they expressed interest in working on interior work over the winter months. So they were unavailable for this project at this time.
And it's not taking away from anyone's wages, it's just moving it from wages that are gonna be unused this fiscal year.
This is from 2019.
So I'll make a motion to transfer the amount of $7,020 from account number 231-5120 ambulance wages to account number 192-5200-005 public safety building purchase services to be used to paint the public safety building all doors and trims.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any more discussion?
I assume that, bids went out and this is the lowest bid? Was a
No.
process or no?
No.
Because it's
It's
under.
under.
$110,000.
Yep.
But just, I think we did mention this in our meeting a couple weeks ago. It is a local in-town business that will be doing the work, so.
Mhm.
And it needs to be done, I guess.
Yeah, there was, I think Mike had said that there was a door that was replaced or something. Is that, Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong. There was a door that was replaced because of the storm that took out part of the building or something. That,
Yep.
and
I don't recall.
Yes, but they ended up replacing 2 doors.
Right.
So those need to be primed anyway. But that was a smaller job. Any more questions? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, new business. We did the 048 Pleasantdale Solar Pilot Agreement while Diane was here. Next, for signature, we have 2 things that are related. First is the Hubbardston Assessing IMA. Oh, and I'm going to be passing around the transfer approval. So this is the intermunicipal agreement, which has been reviewed by council, and I believe has not yet, right, been executed by Hubbardston. We're the first to execute. Yeah. That's number 1. Number 2, which is 050 under new business, is 049 under business, is the notification from KP Law that they are also town council for Hubbardston, and so they needed to disclose that.
May I ask a question? And I think Kevin's still here from the assessors. Are you aware of this?
Oh, I'm aware, well, if you want to.
Is it okay
That's
if I?
fine, yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm not sure what you're aware of. So maybe you tell me what you're aware of,
Well,
and I'll tell you what I'm aware of.
No,
We'll go
I
the
think
other way.
we had just asked Mike to work with the Board of Assessors in making sure that this was on board, right, feasible and on board with what you needed and
Right,
wanted.
yeah,
and-
we had some rotating door, I guess is the best way to say. We had, as far as the 20-hour, 16-hour a week clerical work being done, there was a lot of people that were coming in and out, and there was some issues with training, I think was the best way to put it. So as we look at it, and we look at the growth of the town, and we look at the hours Diane's putting in, now Diane's putting into the solar, so with RGC and all that, we looked at looking into a joint position along with Hubbardston. And I think they've already had, last week I was on vacation, but I think they had 3 or 4 applicants already in, and I believe 2 of those were, were looked at and are being brought back in for a second look also.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Any more questions? All right. Could I have a motion for I'm just gonna ask you a question, Laura. There's only 1 line. Should we all just sort of fit our signatures? It doesn't say chair, so I'm feeling like we'll just all sign it. Can't hurt.
Sure.
Okay. Can I get a motion to sign the Town of Rutland and Hubbardston Municipal Agreement for administrative support to the Board of Assessors?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous, great. All right, and next, we have the document that is the determination. Read for the record, the Rutland Board of Selectmen hereby determines, in accordance with Supreme Judicial Court Rule 3.07 PR 1.7 subsection A and subsection B, that pursuant to a July 19, 2019 letter from Town Council, KP Law PC, we consent to KP Law PC's representation of the Town of Rutland with regard to the review of an intermunicipal agreement, notwithstanding that KP Law PC also serves as town council to the town of Hubbardston, which is a party to the intermunicipal agreement. The board further determines that KP Law PC's responsibility to the town of Rutland will not be materially limited by its responsibilities to the town of Hubbardston. Can I get a motion?
I move to authorize the chair to sign and send a letter notarized by the town administrator and a certified copy of this vote to Senator Ann Goby and Representative Kimberly Ferguson to amend the town's home rule petition.
Nope, we're
Oh.
still on determination.
Oh,
So
sorry.
can I get a motion for the signature of that document as
Sorry.
presented? No, that's fine.
I'll make a motion to sign the determination agreement as presented.
Great. Do I have a
Sorry.
second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And this is 2 copies. All right, now moving on to 050 Home Rule Petition clarification by the Deputy Chief. All right, so Senator Goby's office essentially asked that we add language to the bill and stated that Senate counsel indicated that the process for this is a vote of the board authorizing the chair to sign said letter to Senator Goby and Rep. Ferguson to add the requested language to the text of the bill that was passed at town meeting. Does anybody have any questions about what is happening? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion as it's presented on the document.
I move to authorize the chair to sign and send a letter notarized by the town administrator and a certified copy of this vote to Senator Ann Goby and Representative Kimberly Ferguson to amend the town's home rule petition to extend the retirement age for Deputy Fire Chief David Williams by adding, quote, "No further deductions shall be made from the regular compensation of David Williams under Chapter 32 of the general laws for any service subsequent to his reaching the age of 65, and upon retirement he shall receive a superannuation retirement allowance equal to that which he would have been entitled had he retired at the age of 65, end quote, to the text of the bill."
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you. And Laura, that letter's not ready yet, right? I'll just sign it when it's ready. Okay, great. All right, we're moving on to the back. I believe there's no correspondence. Is that correct? It's empty. Is there any other business to come before the board? I went with a brief public comment. Do you have a, yeah. You can stay. It's late. Just, yeah.
Just a couple of things.
Name,
Number one.
Name and address.
Norm Anderson, 34 Brittle Drive.
Thank you.
Are you Am I a registered voter? I don't know. That was the point, I don't remember.
Oh.
Number one, we have recently received an application for a special permit for a new Dunkin' Donuts building in the center of town. And it appears at least that facility is going to be significantly bigger than the existing Dunkin' Donuts. I really do feel that certainly it's going to elicit a lot of community comment. And I would just like to bring it to the select board that we would certainly appreciate, not just from the community, but very definitely from the select board as a unit, comments and or any sort of, I guess I'll say suggestions even, regarding.
Is it a discussion you want us to have at our next meeting as a board and then provide you with our comments? Or were you looking?
That's fine,
Okay.
that's fine, that's fine.
So, Laura, let's,
Okay. That's number one, that's on a positive note.
that was the positive?
That was a positive.
Good times.
About as positive as I'm gonna get tonight.
Ooh.
The second one is the state of the community hall annex.
Oh my gosh.
I guess first of all, was the restructuring, whatever you wanna call it, of that annex, has that been given the blessing of the selectmen following any input?
No. The work that is being done right now in that annex is ostensibly to correct things that were an issue. And I believe the money being used is, Laura, it wasn't Green Communities. I believe it was Town Administrator. I know, I do too. So, to answer your question, no final decision has been made on this move that has been talked about in the past, which is whether or not dispatch is ultimately moving over to the annex, pushing the rest of us out.
I'm not looking that far down the road.
Oh.
Okay, I'm talking
Back it
about
up.
immediate. Because this renovation, whatever you wanna call it, correction, has been going on at this point for about 4 weeks.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Closing the gap. All they're doing is closing up the petitions that didn't go all the way to the ceiling. Okay, I was talking today with our planner, who is very, very bothered by this at this point.
Yeah, I
That
happen, yeah.
They are not even gonna be able to get into paint for probably another 2 weeks. Never mind the time that it's going to take. And to be perfectly honest with you, for the life of me, I cannot understand how that reorganization in that building makes even one slight bit of sense.
Yeah.
It just plain doesn't. It really appears there has been no planning, okay? Number two, it seems to me that the work is gonna proceed, whenever the DPW gets a few minutes to do some work.
So the
And
DPW is
that's
doing
it.
work?
Yeah, it's internal,
Okay.
Yeah, it's all internal.
which is,
Okay? In the meantime, at least 3 significant boards in town, and our planner, who is ending up having to step over wires to his computer, okay? Looking at the backs of file cabinets instead of the front. Having what was a very, very nice examination table filled with all of the stuff that had to be moved away from the walls and that sort of thing.
so
It's ridiculous.
I agree with you. Dave's work environment as a full-time employee needs to change. So
Boy,
to
oh
me,
boy, does it.
that's a priority. I certainly, I don't know if it's in our purview to offer this. For meetings, it would make me very happy to see this room, which is so perfectly set up for a lot of things. Hold on, I see you shaking your head. Be used more for meetings when you have to. We know that we can set up nice big tables in the center and it still works for you and it's enough space for you. So I'm not saying it's ideal and I'm not saying it's your first choice, but it's certainly better than what we have going on over there right now in the annex, which is, it's not usable right now for meeting space. And Dave said you've
All I'm saying
gone,
right now is, whatever they're doing,
just finish.
finish it.
Yeah. All right,
We don't have to wait until snowfall.
let us,
There's no good reason to wait that long.
oh my
Not only
God,
that-
snowfall.
The shifting that they're planning on doing, they should have had somebody come in here and an architect, take a look at it, period.
Yeah.
Because I don't want Dave to move for crying out loud. Right now, he should be looking at plans and everything else that's going on here. And we can't even meet there. We have to take stuff
Yeah,
someplace else.
yeah, no, it's,
And whenever
not-
you get there, we always need something else.
right, it's not,
Not right.
no, it's not ideal by any stretch. So let's see what we can do rapidly to get Dave into a better place, because that's not appropriate. And then at least in the meantime, figure out, maybe you can talk to Peter and whoever else is in the back room tonight, see if this will work sometimes. And I fully understand that there are times when you have so much stuff, it's not necessarily,
There are times when, yes, we need something more than
yeah,
that building could ever,
right, but not always. No, I know.
Not always. Yes, sometimes, and I have no problem, certainly with that whatsoever. My only real problem is, they started this, they've disrupted the whole building over there, and now they're sitting there with, excuse the expression, their thumbs, you know exactly where.
Okay, I think that's been made very clear. Let's, priority to get Dave into a better place and then get this finished. Okay.
So that's my
Laura?
negative side.
Somebody else in the building has a comment. Laura?
I did speak with, it's Mark Zanaro at DPW.
Okay.
The only work that still needs to be done is sanding down the walls, which they're planning, I believe, to do this weekend. They don't want to do the sanding and painting while
Gotta
people
cover
are
everything.
in
Okay.
there for working
Dust.
hours.
Okay.
Because of the dust cover.
All right.
That'd be nice for a file.
Well, let's
Yeah, everything.
let's
They're covered up.
let's confirm that before we. Okay. All right. Thank you. Somebody have a comment about? Yep.
I just, made me think back to, and I just looked in, another committee that I had put in for was the Ad hoc Building Committee back in February. And it never, as far as I know, was never really formed. And I hear about stuff like this, that maybe the Ad hoc Building Committee would have been the one to contact Mr. Buckley and say, hey, we had this plan, I thought that so I'm kind of curious on a side conversation, when would that Ad hoc Committee start and why hasn't it? And should we get going on it so that these things don't happen?
We should get going on it. I think it was meant to be more evaluative, if that's a word. I don't know.
That's what I understood it as
Yeah,
too.
I don't know
Go
that
around,
they'd be good.
evaluate,
Yeah.
figure out plan of attack,
Yeah.
timeframes, costs, all that type of stuff. And then if there was something in between, then maybe that committee is one that can
Yeah.
oversee the projects as they start and make sure that they finish on a
Yeah.
timely.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you.
Let me know. I'm ready to go on that one.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Did Norm have anything else? It was those two.
Oh, it was just
Okay.
the two?
You had me geared up. I was making
had
like a
to
whole
make it
number
two.
three.
Progressively getting worse.
Okay.
Could have gone a lot worse. All right. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.